I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook, baby.
Creative play too, actually. But,
Yeah.
That is creative. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you want to show what you just showed us, Kay? Which
So,
was amazing.
Elegant wine glass, right? Ish, with Jägermeister.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be like a Sauvignon Blanc, or excuse me, like a Cabernet Sauvignon. It's Jägermeister. What vintage is it?
Oh,
Start.
yeah.
Cat. Stop it.
I have no idea. I was gonna actually get some wine, and the day was just too crazy. And I looked at my Jägermeister, and I thought that'll do. So
I stayed at the Jägermeister hostel in Munich when I was 22,
wow.
and they gave you a free shot of Jägermeister when you checked in. It's like the most college thing ever.
That's cool.
That's what's so funny about it is I only discovered it living in Europe. People talking about it because it's good to take this stuff for your digestion or whatever. Europeans just look at alcohol a lot differently in a lot of ways, obviously.
Yeah.
But then when I started telling people that I liked Jägermeister, everyone said it brought back college memories that I don't actually know these memories, so I can only smile and nod, But
Unfortunately, I don't know about you, Joe, and Kay, you're from Canada. I don't know about you either, but Jaeger bombs became a big thing when I was, and it's very stereotypical New Jersey thing.
Yeah.
Red
Bull and Jaeger, which are like my two least favorite things ever. I hate Red Bull. The odor makes me like nauseous, and then to add Jägermeister to that is just a recipe for disaster. But I have done some.
I've got a terrible palate when it comes to alcohol. Like I like almost any type of alcohol. Like there's so little that I won't drink. And by the way, I'm not an alcoholic. So I'm just putting out there. But like so
do you like tequila?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I like tequila, yeah.
That tracks.
Tequila like a couple times. Everybody has horror stories with tequila too, and I just feel like did I just miss?
I don't like tequila
or something. I don't know.
I've got great stories about tequila. I just don't remember any of them. But I mean, so I was at Grocery Outlet, which has a lot of overstock from other grocery stores, like dirt cheap. And so I was in their liquor section because sometimes they have cool stuff for pretty cheap.
Right.
And I got something that I'm not proud of, but
what is it?
So I didn't know about this. I guess Hooters is making whiskey now?
Oh, you did post that. I saw.
Yeah.
Wait, it's Hooters whiskey?
Yeah. Because it was like $10 or something. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. And I mean, I've never been to a Hooters.
Really?
No, never.
Oh.
I've been to one strip club and it was abandoned. So it's like, yeah, like I'm pretty innocent, dude.
Nice aesthetic, yeah.
Well, Hooters isn't a strip club. It's a
but
restaurant.
I'm just saying, it's like, but I mean, it's not exactly savory though. I mean, it's not like guys go there.
I think a lot of them aren't going out of business anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So like when I was at the grocery store and I was like, I don't know, Hooters whiskey and for $10. I don't know. So I was looking up reviews, and then like the first article that popped up, it just said Hooters launches a new liquor line. And it doesn't look good. And so I was like, oh, okay. All right. So I'll give it a shot.
You're like right up my alley. Yeah, perfect.
Is it any good?
I've had worse, actually. So it's fine.
If you mix it with like ginger ale or Coke or whatever, like how bad could it be?
Yeah.
You're not taking shots of it.
So you're gonna pour some then, or am I the only person doing this?
Well,
I thought we had a pact.
I'll have some. The only thing is I'm drinking this. So I guess Warheads, the super sour candy. I guess they make an energy drink.
What are you doing over there?
This is like a different version.
What are you doing? Warheads energy drinks, Hooters whiskey. I'm gonna bounce this out. I'm just drinking ice water. So.
All right, but yeah, okay.
My Jägermeister away. I just, someone had suggested happy hour.
No, drink.
That wasn't me. That was the Reckless Muse Twitter account. I don't know who.
Right, that's true. That's true. Right.
Oh, out of the bottle too.
But I tried absinthe a few weeks back.
The first time.
I've had it before, but they did like the fancy, like they had the Victorian contraption with the sugar cube and the whole production and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know. It tasted like my backyard after a rain.
One of my favorite bars in New Orleans is like a little pirate bar right next to the cathedral. It's called Tony Seville's. And they have that. I hate absinthe. I know it's gonna be like, oh, of course you do, but I have a bad story about absinthe. I drank too much of it in London when I was studying abroad, and I was on the subway, like the tube. I got off, puked on the platform, and just got right back on the subway. And we're like within that amount of time. It was pretty phenomenal.
And then never touched it again.
I actually have not touched it again yet. So it's been 11 years.
Oh,
11 years absinthe free.
Well, anyway, welcome back, Kay. Thank you so much for coming back. It's great to see you again.
I was just thinking, I get to go talk to my buddies. That's what it felt like today. So, I really enjoyed our chat last time. So,
yeah, I know. I know we've been talking about this for a while, so it's been great to have you back.
We're the internet's buddies. That's our new tagline. Twitter's buddies.
So tell us, what have you been up to? What are some interesting projects that you've been working on lately?
So much. And I know we were connecting in the fall, but I released chapter 3 to my Catholic project, Cash on Myrrh. So it's just really gentle, contemplative, religious stuff. This is my first set of songs with that project that's original stuff. So that was really nice to do. And I recorded it out in Santa Monica with my amazing friend who does all kinds of great work. So it was nice to work with him. And so that was kind of on the docket, released. It's been cool. We have some videos planned and actually some really interesting collaborations coming with this DJ, Robbie Rivera. And he's not like some household name exactly, but he's super successful and has done a lot of really cool work and has wanted to collaborate. So he's done such interesting mixes that I never expected with my Catholic project. It's kind of this very interesting new genre that I'm excited to start releasing. So yeah, so that's been a lot of fun.
Very cool.
And then I'm in the studio finishing up a folk project, the Joni Mitchell project. We talked about it last time. This is like an ongoing saga, but bit by bit in the studio, getting those done and out. And then just started recording the pop album, the full pop album.
So you're selling out, huh?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I moved to LA, and then it was pop. Which is
she went full California.
I don't know who you are anymore.
Have you ever seen that?
Used to be okay.
Have you ever seen that? Do you ever watch documentary Now?
Oh yeah.
The one where they go full California. It's like
one.
Fred Armisen and Bill Hader. Like every documentary they have on there, it's all spoofs on real documentaries. So I don't know exactly what this one's about. Might be about the Eagles, but I'm not sure. The band, of course. And so like they're this band from Chicago, like real Chicago guys, and they move to California and they go like full California, and they're called the Blue Jean Committee, and they like grow their hair real long and be kind of like that 70s hippie, like pseudo hippie-ish thing. And they get a lot of crap back home because they play at a vegetarian like concert, and they're from like pork, like sausage manufacturing families and stuff. It's very, one sells out and goes like totally corporate, and one like returns to his roots. Very good spoof on a documentary.
I've only seen a few episodes, but it's good. That's a good show though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically something like that happened, I guess. It was so funny because part of just coming here, part of one of the contracts I signed was doing some co-writing with my amazing friend out here, Fabio, who his gift is definitely more the pop angle, I think. Like we could do some cool folk stuff, but it's what I thought of with him and co-writing and for things for pitching. We pitched like a Christmas song and got that on, I guess it was a Lifetime movie a couple years ago. So that was fun.
Oh, nice.
Oh, cool.
We were doing a bunch of that stuff, and the pop thing just sort of happened. And then I just enjoyed it so much. Like it was something so different for me. And I don't know. I just keep saying it was good for me. And now I've got all these old songs that finally now have a place to express themselves properly. Because some of the stuff you write needs more production. And that just wasn't really my scene. Like I always did this really simple singer-songwriter thing. And so I love it. It's so much fun. It's so enjoyable to just go work with Fabio and get these out. And yeah, I'm excited to release that. That'll be a little while yet, but we're getting moving on it. Yeah.
So I'm curious about how, was it difficult for you kind of adapting to a new style of sort of singing and songwriting to like new genres, or was it something that you slipped into pretty easily for you?
I think for me, it's just all interesting to me. Like I've done everything from opera and polyphony to now pop, and it's all just part of the creative process. And I know you do a bunch of different genres too, right? So you probably understand this. I think I like the sort of the intellectual game or puzzle that you have to do when you're writing a song with somebody and the production process. And so that's always interesting and satisfying to me. And then I just really get a kick out of surprising people now. Like I just think it's really fun to do something really outside my lane, and all of it's just been fun and enjoyable. So I'm all
cool.
Yeah.
So I listened to your song. I don't know when this was released, but it was "Life's Never Perfect, but It's Good," and I really enjoyed that song. And it reminded me a lot of like Aaron Copland. Did you ever are you familiar with like Appalachian Spring and Simple Gifts? Like, are you familiar with that at all?
I actually not.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, I think you would love it because Aaron Copland, he wrote a very he was classical, early 20th century classical, but like he had a very rustic, fanfare for the common man, like a sort of Midwest style. But there's a piece that he wrote. I think it's actually based on like an old Quaker tune called Simple Gifts that he did like this beautiful orchestra. But it actually your song actually reminded me a little bit of like it has this very sort of like working out in the farms, like this very like agricultural, like pastoral vibe that reminded me a lot of Aaron Copland. So I mean, which I love, I think is wonderful. But so wow. So and also you've been writing on Substack too, right?
Yeah, trying to get finally into a more regular schedule on that. It's kind of, I think we always overestimate what we can do. Actually, I heard someone say it this way: we overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 10. Yeah, it's such a good phrase.
That is good. Yeah.
But so it's just been so many things going on in the backdrop, like all of these different business things I'm working on in the backdrop, and finally though, sitting down, getting in a schedule, and really enjoying sharing there, because I think we need artists voicing their opinions on culture and life a lot more, because artists bring something unique to the table. So much of everything we hear is just political discourse, and it's so important to get the artistic voice. Like I know you guys do you both write or just you, Joe?
Yeah, we both write. Yeah. Ben's a novelist, so he's like an actual writer.
Yeah, I write like Joe said, novels, short stories, political pieces, like kind of everything, like just random things. Like if I have a experience that I think could be a 5-minute read on Medium, like I'll just write it out and send it to Joe, and he puts it on the TRM page.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I think so much of just all of discourse has become so political, and obviously I care about these things, but I think there's a sadness in me that artists can't just be artists these days. You sort of have to, if you want to build any kind of audience or traction, you have to talk about the thing that everybody's talking about.
You have to be a multi-hyphenate, they call it now. Which is infuriating. But it's like I say everyone has to have a what I call like minor in activism. Like they're not full activists, but you can't just be a singer. You can't just be a writer. You have to do that and then also be an activist on the side.
That's a really good way to put it, because that is what it feels like sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's frustrating because, so for example, tonight I'm going to a talk that's being hosted by some group, and it was like a free lecture, and the title of it was just, what is the value of art? So I was like, oh, this is something I've been kind of thinking about. I go to a lot of art galleries and things, so I'm curious about how, what are the metrics of what art is, of what constitutes real art. And so I'm looking at the speakers, and then it's like, okay, lecturer, professor, blah, blah, blah. And then I see activists. I'm like, here we go. So I'm sure it's gonna be pretty frustrating, but at the same time, it's like, I at least want to hear what they have to say. But you're right.
What's it about?
I think it's actually about like sort of like the monetary value of art.
Oh.
$1,000.
I know.
Just go and start yelling out numbers.
The more oppressed you are, then the more valuable the piece becomes. I think that's what it's about. I just kind of glanced at it, and so I was like, all right, well, I'll go check it out. But, I mean, it's but no, you're getting back to what you were saying, Kay. Like, it is frustrating because I think it also it often gets in the way of appreciating the piece itself. Like whenever you have, this is a cool movie or this is a fun TV show, but then you see the creator saying, oh, I made this because I wanted to lecture white people on the importance of blah blah blah. And it's like, It couldn't just be entertainment. It could just be a distraction from politics. Now it's a reminder of politics now.
You just never get away from it. And I think people used to be rightly critical of a lot of Christian stuff that was just always, it's like it couldn't resist moralizing somewhere in the middle of it or perpetually. And that was a just criticism. And I've never liked that. There are a lot of even really good novelists. I've enjoyed most of their work. And then you just see it pierce through and it's like, stop, please let me, like, respect me as a reader a little more, you know? But now we've seen in the last few years, which I'm sure we touched on a little last time, just how dominant that's become on the left now too. And everybody's just so intent on making very clear and explicit the exact thing they want you to understand when they do their piece of art. And it's so sad because it takes all of the joy and pleasure, I think, out of an artistic experience when you feel like you're being sort of manipulated in this very specific way that disrespects your intelligence, you know?
Right. I think that it's become very trendy to shy away from ambiguity in art, where it's like, even if for you, when you create a piece of art, whether it's a song or a movie or a TV show or a novel or a poem or whatever, but you know, for you as the artist, but okay, but you know what? I don't want to make this too explicit. I want to let the audience wrestle with it and come up with their own conclusions. But now it seems like, you know, I want this to be an extension of my views on the world, on social and political ideas. And that's frustrating because I feel like some of the greatest works of art are ones that have some kind of mystery to them, where it's like people from a wide variety of backgrounds can approach it and find some meaning, and like, you know, like there could be 1,000 different interpretations of what it means. But now when it's like, okay, you're obviously taking one side against the other, it's like, well, then it's like, there's no ambiguity. There's nothing to wrestle with.
Have either of you, Joe, and I know I said you should watch this movie, but have you seen Tar?
Still haven't seen it yet.
Tar, Cape. I think this is a movie that like does a great job of what we're talking about right now, but like as in balancing it and making really interesting points about separating the art from the artist and kind of reinventing yourself and identity politics and real talent and the beauty of something as pervasive throughout culture as like classical music. Like it's not going anywhere. It's scored and everything. And it's been around for, I don't know, 600 years or whatever it is. And I do think that it has a very like morally, I don't even know if morally gray is the right word, but a interesting character that's not what is so much of what we see, where it's okay, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, this is the side you're supposed to sympathize with, this is the metaphor for what they're against. And so I highly recommend that because I do think it does a really good job of doing the opposite of these criticisms.
That's the one that had the Kate Blanchett one that had that clip that went viral for a bit, where she was lecturing like a woke student about the
but that's the thing, like, so it's not really spoiling anything. Like she's, I would say, the villain. Like that's not, I don't think that's really debatable. And even though I 100% agree with her in that scene, like she's right. And that's the point. It's like, she makes really good points. She's this incredible composer and the most accomplished kind of person in her field. The first, you know, it's like she's the first woman to head the Berlin Philharmonic, but she doesn't want to be looked at it that way. But she also runs a program to like get more women into composing. So it's very much, and then she has, of course, like a dark side to her and all this stuff. But like, that's the point, is she makes these really good points. I don't think like you're supposed to, I think, agree with her in that scene. Like she's making really good points, but does she have something to hide? Are you supposed to separate the art from the artist? There are good arguments there, because we talk about that a lot on here, and I think you, at least Joe and I, usually say like, yeah, you should. Like, I don't think I have to stop listening to Michael Jackson or to stop watching a Kevin Spacey movie or you know, whatever it is, go down the list to enjoy the art and the talent, because you know, eventually we're gonna run out of people. Like it's just gonna, because it's not that, I'm not saying that all artists are evil. I'm saying that our tolerance for what is evil and is going to just come down to like, did you not hold the door open for someone? You can't listen to their album. Right.
Well, I think too, I was talking about this with a friend the other day, just what social media has done. There are so many great artists who would be so much better if they just were never online, you know? I think first time in history where we've even been able to know what an artist has going on beyond their art, really. Like, I guess when someone became very popular, they'd have interviews, but even that was pretty rare, and it was planned out with a PR team. You know, you're dealing with something so.
Well, the mystique is gone, is I think what you're saying. Like the mystique, and I do miss that. It's like celebrities used to like be something to aspire to, and of course, like so many movies about the dark sides of it, you know, what women had to go through, drug addiction, you know, what minorities had to go through. But like, I'm not saying there's a fondness for that part of it, but just like the concept of the celebrity. It used to be like, I don't need to hear about a writer I like tweeting about Georgia voting rights. Like, I don't need to see that, or my hockey team tweeting about Kyle Rittenhouse. Like,
even if you agree with them,
yeah, exactly. Just make the fucking playoffs. I don't need to know what you think about this current event that happened. You're an entity. You're a franchise of the fourth biggest professional sports league in the country. Like, stop. So, and I agree. And Joe and I've talked about it. I think Joe, I won't speak for you, but like we love Stephen King's work. Like we really do, but he ruined himself for me. I've taken his books off of my book list, which is really hard for me to do. It's really tough for me to remove. Like I have that impulse to be like, are you being a hypocrite here? Am I not separating the art from the artist?
Interestingly, that's something I wanted to say with what you were saying is it's not even like, I think if someone really is just like, because of this thing, I don't want to listen to this art or read this book. I think that gets into very silly territory, but I think it's unavoidable when you learn something about Kevin Spacey, for example. Like one of my favorite movies is The Usual Suspects, and I'm so mad.
Love that movie.
I can't think about watching it without thinking about Kevin Spacey as Kevin Spacey. And that's just a very natural human thing, and you can't really control that. You can't really turn off that awareness as you're reading Stephen King or watching these movies. So I think there's just a sadness that the worlds between art and the artists themselves has become so there's no space between them anymore. And even as shows already still being filmed, you know, it's even worse with like these series where you go and check on the actor and then you're already disappointed before you've even gotten to see the
that's the thing too, and I think it's gotten worse because it's not just actors anymore. It'll be like someone will go viral and then it'll be comments to be like, well, gotta, you know, do a background check on her. Did she say anything racist? Or it's like, can we just enjoy this moment of like the one that comes to mind is a couple of years ago with some woman, there was some British show and he would just go up to people and be like, finish the lyric and like right in their face. And, you know, it was supposed to like catch people off guard, but this woman could really sing. She's like this, man, I don't know if you remember this clip. It was, she's singing the song from A Star Is Born. And like, she kept going. He's like, oh my God, keep going. And she's like a professional singer, of course, and all of that. And then people on there like, oh, got to do a background check, make sure she's not, you know, supportive of the Conservative Party or something like that. It's like, what have we gotten to where we can't just enjoy this moment?
Yeah. I was actually talking to my mom about this because she's pretty new to social media. I mean, she's been on Facebook for a while, but she kind of dabbles in Twitter now. And so she was talking.
That's unfortunate.
I know.
Don't credit to that.
But you know, we were talking about it. It's like, you know, being on social media, like it removes the filter that we have like in polite society, where it's like, so you know, if you're having a conversation with somebody and maybe somebody says a political view that you disagree with, but you know, politeness might kick in and you're like, okay, I'm not going to get into an argument with this person. But on social media, you can be like, okay, well, I'm going to argue with this person, or I'm going to say something really snarky and really nasty. And I think it's kind of a similar thing with celebrities and with artists, where it's like before, it's like, you know, I love this movie or I love this novel. It kind of has a political bent that I'm not totally in favor of, but I can still enjoy it. But when they come right out and they say, I'm against this president, this presidential candidate, or I'm against this person, and you're like, oh, okay, now I know for sure exactly what your novel's about. And it's like,
it's not that I really care about so much. Cause like artists are going, at least celebrities are always going to be one-sided, at least vocally, who they support, right? And I think there are a lot more conservative and Republican celebrities than
there are so many,
but they're just not vocal, right?
Yeah.
So the ones who are vocal are going to be always liberal. They're like, I don't even care about that. Sometimes I agree with a lot of what they say. Sometimes I don't. It's not that. It's more like the handful of times that I've had to, like, it's ruined the art for me, like Stephen King. The thing that did it, that actually put me over the line with him, wasn't the constant tweeting about Trump or anything like that. Like, I don't care about that. It was when he started supporting the Disinformation Governance Board. I was like, are you kidding me? Like you're a fiction writer that writes about about teenagers fucking on the floor of a cave or something, and you're going to talk about like what should be permitted and what shouldn't be permitted. Like, dude, you're such a traitor to like what you stand for, and that's what really did it to me. So it wasn't even so much quote unquote political, like, oh, I support the blue team. It was, you are just against a huge value that I hold, which I thought you would hold too.
And he's had some of his books banned in numerous counties and stuff. So it's sort of like, dude, are you not familiar with how this will go for you? Like, you've experienced this?
Yeah, he's a sellout. Yeah. Same with Howard Stern. It's the same thing. It's like, dude, you were the anti-establishment. Like I remember having to hide in the basement with my brother, and like if we heard our parents coming down, we'd have to like change the channel. You would literally tell women to get up so I can get a look at you. And now you're like Mr. Establishment. Yeah. Like telling people who don't get the vaccine that they deserve to die. Like, what happened to you, man? It's just, it kind of breaks my heart because these were like some of my favorite celebrities.
Yeah.
In the end, you just see so much of it is just about ego. And I mean, that was, I would say, the biggest lesson of the last few years is just how uncommon real principle is when push comes to shove. In the end, people like to put different principles forward from, a whole broad array of these things. I'm thinking of Catholics who say something, and then also, the guys you guys are referencing, people anti-censorship or whatever.
Catholics never do anything wrong. Okay,
well, apparently the regime is after the trads now. This is like this
really
is a breaking thing. Yeah, the internal agencies have the trad Catholics in their like very
squares.
I don't know. It's pretty weird, but people really just, when push comes to shove, I just can't believe how few people really do live out the principles that they say they hold. Right. And I think the same thing, even with art, I think that the hardest thing that you see is not even that someone disagrees with you at all, because if they authentically disagree with you, usually it's still palatable. It's this, I don't even have the words for it, but
it's this group thing.
Yeah. Like there's nothing unique or authentic permitted anymore. You always have to be by the script,
Yeah, I feel like I get more frustrated when I'm debating somebody who just kind of repeats buzzwords and catchphrases. Whereas like if I'm debating somebody who genuinely, but like they're knowledgeable, it's like, okay, this is fun though. Like this is actually interesting. Like I'm learning something and you're challenging me. It's like, and if anything, like we're laughing and we're kind of giving each other a hard time, but like in a fun way. But if it's just like, okay, you're like a robot. You're just repeating all the same catchphrases, whether it's on the left, like the hardcore left, or the hardcore right. It's like, okay, this is a really annoying, frustrating conversation. But this leads me to something I want to ask you, Kay. So you're in the music world, which is not exactly known for its morality. So I'm curious about about how you maintain, how you make sure that your moral compass points due north, so to speak. Like how do you make sure that you've got a set of principles that you're sticking to, even maybe you might be getting offers that you're sort of like, this sounds good, but it doesn't really feel right. Like how do you kind of maintain that sort of moral center?
Well, the truth is that I said no to a lot of things pretty early on. And in some ways I've just sort of self-canceled, because for me, integrity is paramount. Sometimes I was just talking to a friend about this too the other day. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just a glutton for punishment or something. The things I think of that I've said no to, but I don't have any regrets. And so what has happened in that process is that I've just connected to more and more other people of integrity that either really respect the way I live and are just people of integrity themselves in terms of just honoring how people want to live out their lives, or people who share a baseline of those values that I work with. And so the funny thing about when you do choose to just live authentically who you are and how you see the world and how you want to live, you run into more and more people who either share that or really respect your right to live that way. Yeah. And so it almost feels like a life cheat code, to be honest. I think a lot of people are so afraid, but it actually frees you to have really rich relationships and people that you love working with and spending time with. And that's been my experience.
Yeah, it's been fascinating because I've only been in LA for almost 3 years now. So it's been interesting meeting other people. And it's like, when I meet other creative people, I kind of test the waters a little bit. So I'll be like, yeah, diversity and inclusion is fine, but I feel like it's starting to go a little overboard. And then most of the time, somebody who they might have said some very progressive things, they'll be like, yeah, I think we're already pretty good with that. Like, we don't need to keep forcing it. And it's like, okay, all right, you're kind of seeing that this stuff's getting a little overboard now.
Well, it's usually also in the places that need it the least.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it needs a lot of diversity and inclusion. Hollywood. Music, the NBA. That's what needs a lot of, which is actually true. The NBA isn't very diverse. So when you look at it, like,
but not in the direction that would be welcome.
Yeah, there aren't that many like Latinx's in the NBA. They gotta have an initiative.
Yeah.
They also need to get a little taller.
Well, and the other thing is too, with Hollywood or the music industry, I think maybe 10 years ago, even maybe as recently as that, I think I could have just been who I was more just around that world. I think it would have been very challenging. I think a lot of people have seen that challenge. But at some point in the last few years, which is, I think, even how we ended up talking, because I started talking about the way I saw the world more publicly, It just became impossible, because you really do just have to be offering like your pinch of incense to the gods all the time to stay on track. And yeah, I don't know. Other people have a higher threshold for that. I just can't do it. You know,
are you still in LA?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you had moved.
No, I'm still here.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. That you're still in LA.
Everybody says that.
Hey, you're in New Jersey, man. That's not much better.
That's why I say that I can shit on everyone, because in the end, like, it all comes back.
I was in Florida, and everybody was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
About LA, yeah.
I've been to Texas, and that's how I never tell people.
Bless your heart.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I love LA still, and I don't know if it's just like this weird affection like you have for
really
for somebody like strange from high school that, you know, just needs like somebody to love them or something.
Joe loves LA.
I tell people, like, I'm in an abusive relationship with LA. It's like, I love it, but I also hate it. There's so much to hate. Like, whenever I see people, you know, shitting on LA, I never disagree with them. I'm like, yeah, the homelessness problem is a real bad problem. And it's like, yeah, like, we are super ultra annoyingly progressive, and it's expensive to live here, but I can't get away. Like, I know.
I liked it more than I thought I would. I will say that.
Yeah.
I was ready to just rip on it for our entire podcast.
I was a pretty good tour guide.
And I was like, you were a great tour guide. And what I've always said is, I really appreciate people who are passionate and love whatever it is. It could be a city, a type of music, movies. Like, even if I don't share it, I like seeing that passion. Joe's that way about LA, which is weird, but fine. And you know, some people are that way about different types of movies or music. My fiance is that way about musical theater. Like, she knows everything about, you know, the history of Broadway and all these things. And I like musical theater a lot. I love theater, but I don't share it to that extent. But I appreciate that sort of passion.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I can't ever really articulate it, but I'm actually working on a piece that I'll hopefully be publishing soon, about LA and my weird relationship with the city and home and how that interacts. And just, I think about it all the time, because it's this incredible sort of theatrical background to be living your life in. You know, you're just always thinking about this weird buzzing city with all of its different facets and unique people, and there's so much there that, and I want to find a language to articulate why I love it so much, because I do. Like, I love it desperately. I love LA, and I always wanted to come, and I wasn't disappointed in spite of all the crazy.
Is LA the first? You said Tennessee and Florida. Did you live in those places, or are you just visiting?
No, I was just visiting this last couple weeks, and especially, who was it? Somebody from Louisiana they were the most like, oh, sorry, honey, you know.
Yeah.
Bless you, honey, you know?
You poor thing.
Yeah. It's like people don't even believe you when you say, no, I actually really love it. I really love it.
Yeah, I get that reaction a lot. A couple years ago, my family and we went to visit some family in Texas.
Okay.
And we wanted to go to the Alamo. Like, it was super packed, so we didn't want to wait in line, but we did want to get our pictures taken in front of the Alamo. But they're so passionate about it, it's really difficult just to get your picture taken in front of it. Really? So my mom, she went up to one of the Texas Rangers, and she goes, "Hi, you know, we're from out of town, and we're from California." And then the guy, and he's like super stern, like super militaristic. He goes, "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am."
That's good. Is that where your family's from, San Antonio, or they live?
I do have a lot of family in Texas, mostly from my dad's side of the family.
In San Antonio?
Yeah, San Antonio. Yeah,
okay.
And also like weird little dusty towns in Texas. Yeah.
You know, I think in the end, it's just that there is this very deep creative root, and it's drawn a certain kind of person for a long time. And that has its negative side. But I think the people who don't fall into the crazy category, who stay, are just of a certain kind of personality, drive, level of creativity that is just super rare. Like, I've lived all over and I've just never known such a high caliber in this category so consistently kind of ever anywhere else. So I don't know. It's just a great place to be. As I think.
But what about the traffic?
Well, I'm an artist, so I work from home like all the time, and
well, if anything, like I see, I've definitely heard of creative people. So, a lot of comedians have moved out of LA to like Texas and to other places.
Yeah, Austin.
So Austin specifically. So I definitely understand why it would put off a lot of creative people. But for me, it like before I moved here, like when I was transitioning from very progressive to very heterodox, I guess, LA still attracted me, and if anything, it was more because of how woke it was. It was because of like
Joe, are you trans heterodox?
I'm transitioning.
You're transitioning from progressive to heterodox. I didn't know you were trans, Joe. I didn't know you were trans. That we can promote that with our podcast.
I mean, you could be gender fluid, you could be politically fluid. So, but the fact that LA was so orthodox actually was kind of like a big attraction for me, because it was like, oh, this is a great place to stand out. Like, there are a lot of rules to break here.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Is there a trad cat community in LA?
Yeah, there is.
Super underground.
Sorry?
It's like super underground.
Not super underground. There are a few kind of big parishes in the city.
You wear robes. It's like a lot of robes and candles.
Ropes and candles.
Robes.
Oh, yeah.
Robes, hey, whatever you're into. I don't know.
Incense, a lot of weird Catholic things like that. Yeah, it's when I say weird, I know that that's kind of how it is perceived, but I think it's interesting because I wasn't always what I would describe as more of a trad Catholic. I was in different kind of, let's say, normie sections of Catholicism culturally. But in LA, what's been really interesting to me is it's so the aesthetic of a more traditional Catholicism is really haunting and really powerful for artists. And I've noticed that many of the most successful and serious artists, and I mean people working in even the mainstream industry, succeeding really well there, are often traditional Catholics. And I've thought about that a lot because I think it does inform a certain level, even just of excellence and a sensitivity to symbol. And it is this kind of cultivation of something beyond just the nitty gritty. Like, we're talking about all this political stuff just always floating. You get to be transported into this totally different zone that has nothing to do with politics or the year we're in or anything. And it really is this timeless, transcendental experience. And I think that really inspires a lot of artists towards greatness. It's been really interesting to me to consider that. So a lot of my friends are kind of in and through that network. And then there's some really beautiful religious orders out here. So monks and priests who work at some of these parishes, and they have some of the most beautiful music probably happening in the classical sphere, maybe around the country at these masses. And they bring in the best quality musicians. Not many of them are not even religious at all, but they just bring in the best musicians from the city and really do just incredible stuff. Like, I want to invite people to come just to experience the beauty of it, because it's
I was gonna say, can you let me know next time?
Yeah, I will totally.
Are they like those singing? You know those singing monks that are real famous in Austria?
Yeah, at Heiligen Kreuz, I've been there and heard them.
Really? Are they like they're Joe? Do you know what we're talking about?
No.
Well, we'll send you that stuff on Twitter. They're really cool. They're known for they're actually not they're praying, but it's in song, and that's what they want to remind you. It's like, no, we're praying, but it's in song form, and it's really beautiful.
So go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So yeah, that particular monastery, I think we're thinking of the same one because they're pretty famous. So monks do these certain prayers like different times of the day, and many of them will sing them. It's mostly the Psalms, but it's some other prayers and things as well. But it's all like in the Gregorian chant style when they do it. And at this particular monastery, they've had an unbroken praying of those prayers for, I think, more than 900 years.
Whoa.
It's so wild. So when you go, you're like stepping into this ancient
Amazing.
continuous prayer. It's so crazy.
Jeez.
Oh, I didn't know that part. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I don't want to, I can't give you like a link or something because it was a long time ago that I was studying this a bit, but apparently Gregorian chant is even very healing physically because of the frequency for our bodies.
That's cool.
So wild, right?
I think it's beautiful. I do love it. And I mean, I think coming from a different angle in terms of art,
yeah.
I say, I've tweeted this, the King James version of the Bible is the most metal thing you could ever read.
I have it.
It
I need
is
to
so
read it.
metal. It's so much of the art. I mean, you go look at a lot of the Renaissance paintings. I visited in Czechia, outside of Prague. There's this town called Kutná Hora, which has the bone church. So it's like this whole church is like the bone chandeliers, and and it's bones everywhere. I'm not just saying this. Like, I felt something when I was there. Like, you feel this pall, this miasma of just, it's not like a darkness necessarily, but it's this, like, it's poignant that you feel walking. Yeah, it's really, really crazy. And I mean, that was all, I think, I don't know what kind of Carthusian monks or something like that. Like one of them, I'm not sure exactly. Don't quote me on that. But, and just the architecture of like Gothic cathedrals is so metal. It's so cool. Think about gargoyles. That's where they come from. And
I think we talked a little bit about this last time in terms of the more Protestant ethic and this kind of very
Protestant. Boring. Episcopalians.
Get a life, Protestants.
Get a life, Methodists.
But there's something in the Catholic aesthetic that is meant to just like put a big stake in the ground permanently, right? So it takes a long time to, I mean, unless someone purposely dismantles stone by stone, brick by brick, some of these buildings, like even the ruins are powerful for centuries, right? So just that whole ethos of building something bigger for longer. So even when I was in school in Austria, there was this school that we were sort of connected with in a little town that used to have this big Carthusian monastery, and in it too was who knows how old, maybe that old as well, maybe 900, maybe 300, but it was old and beautiful. And so you're already kind of haunted by just this sense of history when you walk around a place like that. Right. But then we had stories of, this is like super weird Catholic thing 101. Okay, we're going to go right to the heart of it, guys.
You're good company.
So they, the Carthusians, which is the same as that bone church that you had.
I think so, but don't quote me on that. Yeah.
So they're unique in that they, that saints can be canonized through this like process through the Vatican and everything. And almost everybody is kind of game for that as long as there's like a following, and there are a bunch of prescriptions that they follow to even investigate. But Carthusians don't even let themselves be ever canonized. Like it's the radical humility. Like they just want to be hidden forever on earth, and then even after they die.
I like that.
It's so beautiful and so metal, as the kids say, as Ben says. But it's so I heard a story that I have good reason to believe is true. And they were like digging on the grounds for something, and they found an incorrupt Carthusian monk. So incorrupt means they don't decompose.
Oh.
Whoa is right. So they write the Vatican and they're like, we found this like non-decomposed Carthusian monk. Obviously he's a saint. Do you want to canonize him? And they said, no, he's a Carthusian. We can't just like bury him again.
Yeah. Put him back. Put him back where you found him.
I've seen this movie. Don't disturb it. Just put it back.
Yeah.
It's just it's so wild that, I love these stories because they're just so fun. I don't have any expectations, for what it means to people.
I do think that you don't have to have, like, even religions that I don't belong to. I think Catholicism strikes a nerve with me because I am a Catholic, and you're right. Catholicism is meant to. I don't mean this in a bad way, but like overwhelm. Like I do think it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be as close to God's kingdom on earth as you can get. Like, we want to be grand. And I get the Protestant arguments for that. While Protestantism was more about individuality and simpleness. And maybe you could argue a lot of that money, instead of going to the next altar, went to poor. Right. I get all of that. I really do. I grew up on Protestants, but I love you guys. Actually, where I live, the Methodists have there's like a Methodist mafia here. It's like they have like a lot of power in some of these towns. I'm not even kidding. Like, you got, like, there are a handful of Jersey Shore towns where, like, the Methodists run shit. Like, they run the towns. Yeah, actually, where my parents live. So other, like, I think there are parts of Islam that are like very imposing to me. Have you ever heard the call to prayer? I heard that in Istanbul, and it's like overwhelming. And I've always said, like, how come there aren't more like Muslim opera singers? Because these guys can hold a note so long. The muezzins, I think they're called, and like some of the mosques are gorgeous, and it's all calligraphy because they can't make human forms or whatever. But I do think that Catholicism, it's meant to, and you don't have to be Catholic to appreciate like the power of it and the beauty of it. And I've always, I mean, they have that. I think we talked about this last time, but like the concept of cathedral building was people like would dedicate maybe their entire careers to one section of a cathedral that took 40 years to make, but they were making it for God, so it didn't matter. And like that doesn't exist anymore. Like the bill, even, and you don't have to do cathedrals. Like I'm in New York City all the time, and they're in gorgeous neighborhoods of like brownstones and these, and the West Village and Harlem and the Upper West Side and so, but then everything new is just glass and boring and nothing. There's no character to it. And if there is character, it's like, oh, just be boring because the character is even worse. And we have lost that, which I think is a shame.
Yeah. Well, and
I think even with mega churches, but like even with mega churches, like we don't have that anymore.
Yeah. I tend to think that atheism or agnosticism is just sort of a luxury of a very particular moment in history, because if you look over, if you kind of do a scan of history, like something's always asserting a strong, powerful dominance. Like that's just what happens, and you can choose what that's going to be. And I think we talked last time, in the absence of deeper, more meaningful, maybe religious foundations, now we're seeing this other thing come in, which is just kind of chaos and censorship and this very strange kind of religion.
I agree. And I think there's a vacuum right now, and we don't know what that is. I think some people are trying to make it democracy. It's like, oh, fucking shoot me. Like, no, it's not going to be democracy. Like democracy existed. What was that? No, I'm not. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that I'm against democracy. I'm sick of the fetishization of democracy. Right. And I think a lot of people say, we love democracy, but it's like, okay, then move somewhere where you're the minority. Move somewhere to. Let's say you're like, because this really come from the Democrats who just fetishize it. The Republicans did for a while when it was like democracy abroad, like, oh, we're bringing to Iraq. Well, that turned out well. But like, okay, you're from LA and you're just the standard liberal Democrat. Go move to a part of Arizona where you're in the minority, or even part of California where you're in the minority, and your town council and your mayor are Republican. Do you like democracy now, or do you want some more power? No, of course not. So that's why I can't stand it, because it's very short-sighted. And so I think that's part of it. And like we saw this also with the Soviet Union. Like, of course they had religion. Like North Korea has religion. It's just not Christianity. It's not Islam. It's not Judaism. It's the state. And and the figures are the figure of Marx and Lenin and Stalin and these other people. And the state is the religion.
Yeah.
So what's funny is I actually had a similar conversation with Alma Cook, another one of our guests. So I'm an atheist, and so she was actually kind of, she's like, well, like what made you go from Catholicism to, at the time I was an agnostic, and now I'm an atheist. And so she was kind of like, well, don't you feel like this urge to be part of like something, or part of a community, or like some deeper stuff? And what's funny is like something that I think was sort of, I don't want to say it was my religion, but I think sort of something that fulfilled that void for me was actually storytelling.
Yeah.
Because there is a karmic element that is prevalent in a lot of religions, and it's so prevalent in screenwriting. Right. So whenever I go through a tough time in my life, when it's like, oh, things aren't going the way I want, or I experience some kind of setback, it's like, okay, hold on, but this is just one act of the story of your life here. You still have a lot of control here. You can make the right decision, because that in stories, whether it's in a superhero movie or in a mythological tail or whatever. Like, you know that the decisions that you make right now can impact the rest of your life. Yeah. And so I'm in the minority where it's like, I'm an atheist, but I understand the religious, and not only understand, but like appreciate the religious impulse of like believing in something greater than myself, instead of just kind of, taking a more nihilistic, anything is whatever I want it to be. It's like, no, making the right decision will impact your life. You have to believe in the importance of consequences of your actions, and even the smallest actions of your life, because it's funny because like, I connect that to storytelling, where it's like, one little detail can snowball and turn into something bigger.
Yeah. It's interesting because I even just from the perspective of like from a more religious perspective, one of the most thrilling things for me is the concept of my life as a story too. So it's just cool to hear you say that, because I always think of like, I used to joke about it. I thought one of the coolest things about God is that he's so coherent. He's like the most brilliant author, right? So it's just interesting to hear you say that, because that's just such a deep resonance for me about deriving meaning from my own existence, is this concept of a story arc,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Kay and I will be hanging out when Joe is bathing in the fires of hell. So,
what's funny is
we'll be looking down at you. Oh, it looks hot down there.
I saw Jordan Peterson. He gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, so I saw him. I don't know if it was a show, it was a lecture in Sherman Oaks, I think. And so he did a fascinating talk on the Book of Exodus, and it was really fascinating. Like, it wasn't just a biblical talk; he was finding the meaning and sort of finding like the modern relevance in it, and it was really good. And then he did a Q&A afterwards. And so like, I'm so used to going to like heavy metal concerts where like they come out and they do an encore at the end. So like my friends and I were like, so as soon as he walked off stage and everybody's clapping, we're like, is he gonna come back out? So we were like, dude, he's gonna come back out and be like, no, fuck it, like I'm gonna do Book of Revelations. We're like, oh my god, I didn't think he was gonna do it, but he did. Yeah, Revelation. But it's even though I'm not religious,
did he come back?
No, he did not. This is not a heavy metal concert.
Wow.
This is Jordan Peterson. But I still appreciate. I mean, it's funny because like I'm kind of a slut for Mozart. Like,
you could just stop after slut.
No, I mean, like, Jordan Peterson has articulated this the way I live my life, actually, in a way where it's like, you don't have to believe that God exists, but you should live your life as if he exists. I'm like, okay, I'll go with that second option. I can do that. But I love Mozart so much, and like when I listen to, I love all of his music, but like when I hear his religious music, it's so much more powerful. And it's like, how come you weren't bringing this power to when you were just, composing music for the king? Like, how come for a mass, when somebody died, you're doing this incredibly powerful, uplifting music, but then like, you're just like, this music is just for entertaining rich people. It's like, how come you didn't bring that power out for that? Like,
actually, so Peter Kreeft has a book he wrote. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's like a Catholic apologist, pretty well known.
Right.
But he goes through like the arguments for the existence of God, and they're mostly based in like Thomistic, like Thomas Aquinas and his theology and all of these greats. And then one of the arguments he gives is there is the music of Bach.
Yeah.
This is one of the like clear, punch kind of.
Bach was a hardcore Lutheran, and I love Bach, but like for Bach, it was like his belief in God was sort of like the underlying, like every single note that comes out of my fingers is for God.
Yeah, you're not gonna get that from democracy or like DI like that, and I mean we need some of the most beautiful works of art, some of the most beautiful buildings are because of the belief in God.
Yeah.
And I think there can be some.
So I think
some substitutes, but like if we lose it entirely, I think it would be a detriment to culture.
Beethoven, he was ostensibly religious. I don't think he was that devout. At least judging by the works that he composed, I don't know off the top of my head if he composed much music for the church. But he was actually the first of the great composers to consider music to be art, which is weird because
really?
but like when you look at like what Bach and Mozart and Haydn before Beethoven, for them it's like they were craftsmen, like they were artisans, not necessarily artists. Like it's like, okay, like I'm being paid to compose a piece of music for a celebration or for a mass or something like that. But for Beethoven, he was like, I'm composing music for posterity. Like this is how I'm going to live into the future. So like I said, I think he was somewhat religious, but you know, even if he was not religious, there was still some kind of like bigger overarching purpose for his music, which is like, I'm going to create something that will live on past me and influence people and uplift people and express the tragedy and triumph of the human condition.
I think, yeah, and if we're gonna stick to the Germans here, I think like Nietzsche's whole, he gets quoted a lot for like God, saying like God is dead,
and he's killed him.
But like, yeah, but he doesn't like mean that in reverence. Like he wasn't saying that as like a celebration, like God is dead now, we're liberated. It's like, no, it's gonna be filled with other things that are like can be a lot worse. I forget exactly the other quote. What was he? Is he the one who said if we killed God, if humanity, if like God didn't exist, humanity would have invented him? Is that Nietzsche?
Sounds like him, but I know very little.
I can't remember, but it's like, and I do think he just gets misquoted a lot because he was very much I think he gets used a lot by like rad kind of like dudes who are also that sort of new atheist group. When I do think they misquote him very often.
Well, what is interesting to me is kind of that survey of history. And if you trace things back, I mean, if someone can dig up a civilization that didn't practice human sacrifice without monotheism, I would like to know, because without some concept of this great moral arbiter, I think the idea that we had this kind of neutral territory, I'm not convinced that that's even possible. Mm-hmm. And I think people underestimate how much we're living on the capital of centuries of specifically Christianity in our culture. Mm-hmm. You know, but any culture that they're living on centuries of a certain moral code that I think we underestimate how much is a safeguard against some of the worst of what we can see in humanity. So it's interesting to me to just always contemplate that, you know, and think about.
Right. Like, you know, not being so quick to dismiss the hard-won battles of like, you know, like so many of the rules and guidelines that we live by today in modern society. You know, it's become very easy to be like, well, whatever, like, you know, like, you just be whoever you want. It's not hurting anybody. It's like, but have you at least considered the possibility that this can go too far? Like, can we pump the brakes a little bit?
Yeah.
Or do you want a monarchy? Because I have been.
Me?
No, or you, or
no, I love the severe dictatorship. Yeah.
I was laughing because there are definitely some like very, very traditional Catholics who would argue for that. And in the past, I just thought, oh, like weirdos. Like, what are you talking about? You know?
Yeah.
And I think watching how things have devolved, maybe it's kind of it's very much kind of a Jordan Peterson take. A lot of things, I'm sort of dissatisfied with a lot of things he's been saying lately, and we could get into that too. But as a general principle, what I loved about him was he was such a realist about human nature. And I think when I look at, like, whenever you're thinking about ideal political systems or ideal moral codes or anything, you're always looking at it, at least for our times, it's always in comparison to some theoretical utopia rather than just the reality of human nature. So my perspective of even just hierarchies in authority, without saying anything too strong, because I'm not going to go on the record as being some monarchist, but I just understand that the hierarchy is something that we can't avoid. It just happens. So now in our society, it's like the tech bros and new money, and they have all this power. Whereas at least in theory, you had this nobility structure where people were trained and educated and given some sense of the weight and responsibility of what it meant to be a leader. And interestingly, I have a priest friend who's from a European country and is noble blood, you know, and for him, even the discernment of his vocation to the priesthood was connected with this sense of like ownership as a member of a noble family, like this sense of I need to give back and be a leader and take care of my country and its people. I just have that different kind of set of things floating around in my brain when I think about these things. And it's been really interesting to me to contemplate watching everything devolve the last few years.
I've been thinking about it, and I do believe that the best form of government would be a benevolent dictator. However, I don't know if that's possible because of human nature and because power corrupts. So it's like it's a catch-22. And
then the tension between neighbors is so, it's seeing how damaging is so strange. I guess it's just we're in a very strange time to be thinking about these things, you know?
Yeah, and also, I mean, I guess from my point of view, it's like where my values are. So it's like nothing gets done, and there are already a lot of elite people who just help themselves. And I mean, I'll be my favorite politician of all time is Huey Long, and he was basically considered the dictator of Louisiana. And but he was one of the few who, like, he was corrupt, he was anti-democratic, he used kind of some thuggish tactics, but he actually helped people. Like, he did good things. He created infrastructure, gave back to the poor, he helped children. And like, I respect it because he didn't like throw his enemies in jail. He didn't create gulags. He didn't do any of that. Like he was, I think, as close to a benevolent dictator as we could get in this country.
I guess it's like, is the choice dictator or no dictator, or is the choice there are people who are going to have that level of power no matter what we do, and they can be hidden and they can be badly formed and they can have it unjustly, or, you know, that's just a real question. That's not me saying anything one way or another. It's just, I think sometimes we live under this illusion that we can live in this very, very perfectly fair world where everything is structured in such a way that we can all be free in this beautiful utopia. But the question really is do we ever escape the fact that there are going to be people who climb to the top and control most other people? And maybe we want to pick what kind of structure that is more than just letting it happen just in this power structure, this really organic, ruthless power structure, which is, I think, what we have now, you know, just the psychopaths like fighting their way to the top. You know? I don't know. It's just an interesting concept. And like I said, I had friends who would talk about this monarchy stuff 10 years ago. And I was like, please don't associate with me. Like, it's
I would be okay with being king. I'm just going to be honest. I think I would be a pretty good king.
You've got a nice regal beard going.
I would sit atop my throne and just people would come to me. I'd just be like, yes, I rule for him. And they'd be like, thank you, my king. I'd be like, yes, move along. I'm the benevolent king. I always think about that, like Game of Thrones and stuff. It's always like the farmer comes up and the queen or king has to make the ruling. I'm like, oh, I could do that. And I'd be very fair and just, but at the same time indifferent and regal, and be like, yes, my subjects.
I think The Simpsons did the best sort of parody of Christianity, but in a way without, for the most part, coming off as like overly edgy or offensive. Like they did this. It was an Easter episode where it was kind of like an anthology thing where they were just kind of like recreating certain parts from the Bible. And Homer was one of the kings. Who was the king who was always like cutting stuff in half?
You mean from the Bible?
From the Bible, yeah.
King.
I'm a Catholic. We don't know the Bible. I'm just joking. No. I've read it cover to cover.
Was it Solomon? I don't.
Yes, I think it was. I think it was him. Maybe it's because that's the most familiar sounding name.
Not David. I don't think. I think it was
Solomon. You mean with the baby when he said?
Yeah. Was that Solomon?
I think so.
Whoever likes bifurcating things.
No, that's the story. Yeah.
Well, so The Simpsons did a lighter version of that. Likely, but like these two men came to him and like, you know, here's a pie, and both of these men believe that the pie belongs to them, and then King Homer says, "Cut the pie in half," and then those two men shall receive death, and I shall eat the pie.
Little Simpson catechesis. That's nice. Yeah.
There's another episode where Bart and his friends they were at like a yard sale, and Ned Flanders, who's like the sort of the Christian guy, and so he had all these trading cards, but they were all biblical figures. And so Bart and his friends are like, oh, free trading cards. So they're looking and they're nerding out. They're like, oh, hey, look, you know, there's so like, what was it? It was something like, oh, Joseph of Arimathea, he had 26 conversions in 8046. Like, oh my god, oh whoa, like. A Methuselah, a rookie card. This is so cool. And then Ned Flanders comes in. He's like, oh, isn't learning about the Bible fun? I'm like, oh, learning? No, oh, gross. And they run away.
Yeah.
But it's like I like how like, oh man, like they're treating conversions like it was like a stat, like an average.
Yeah. I follow a lot of Catholic or like Christian meme stuff. One of them was like, it was like guy who only knows Jesus from his career. It's like, honey, did you hear they crucified our carpenter? What the hell?
You're supposed to come in next week to finish it.
Oh
man.
Oh boy. Oh, that Jesus.
I went to a Jesuit university.
I was
Interesting.
going to ask. I went to a Jesuit law school.
So Santa Clara University, I heard that we had a really good law school. Did you hear about that in the law community? Ben?
Santa Clara?
Santa Clara University.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh.
And well, there is a Loyola in LA that's Jesuit. I went to Loyola in New Orleans.
What did you study, Joe?
Music. Music was mine.
Okay. Yeah.
Emphasis.
Bach. It's Joe just on the ground with sheet music everywhere. It's like so much Bach. There's Bach everywhere.
You know, it is interesting to me that even in the classical world, with such a strong kind of religious backdrop and so much that I would say many or most classical musicians were not identified as very religious at all. I hate saying identify as, like, I don't know how.
I know. It's one of those like charged terms, like diverse, like
yeah. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Like, I think most of the musicians who would play at this mass that hopefully I can get you out to sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah.
It would just be like.
Joe's been hanging out with Satanists, by the way.
Okay, let me buttress this by saying
I just threw that out there.
That's Joe. It's okay.
It's not okay.
I know. I'm already going hell. No,
you're free to come.
No. Here's the thing. So, as Ben forgot to mention, is that the reason why I've been hanging out with the goth, satanic, and vampire communities of Los Angeles, because I'm working on a horror screenplay about a cult.
Right.
So this is for research. Yes, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Seriously, I every time I go to one of these things, I bring a little notebook with me, and so I'm writing. So it's like I look like the narc whenever like I'm hanging out with these weirdos. So and people have come up to me like, "What are you working on?" It's like people are like dancing, getting all freaky and stuff. It's like, no, hold on, this is interesting. This is good material. Also, I'm volunteering. I'm tomorrow. Okay, like my New Year's resolution is to volunteer once a month. So
Joe's transitioning to a Satanist.
We'll pull him back.
and also, here's the other thing. It's like LA Satanists, like they're all like woke vegan hipster Satanists.
They're lame.
Like they're I don't know. It's not the weird. But actually, I am volunteering. Like tomorrow, I'm actually I got to get up early tomorrow morning. So I'm doing a feeding the homeless.
Nice.
I'm doing a homeless thing. Yeah. But anyway, so what were we talking about?
We might have come to the end of that train. I don't know. We went all the way down, like Bible stories, Simpsons, Satanism.
Well, before the Satanism, we were talking about musicians.
Oh, musicians, classical musicians. Just not. It's interesting to me that people who are so passionate about excellence and this really deep history that sort of is unavoidably steeped in a very strong Christian ethos just don't really resonate with any kind of like religious affiliation. It's just always been interesting to me. And that's kind of like universal for artists, but I find it particularly interesting in the classical arts, you know?
I wonder, and I'm just spitballing here, but a lot of creative people tend to be left leaning because of like, you know, it's like a big part of creativity is sort of like eliminating the boundaries between ideas, whereas conservatism tends to be like, you know, we need sort of guidelines, we need sort of boundaries around certain things. And because leftism tends to lead towards atheism or Gnosticism, I wonder if that's kind of like the pipeline from like creativity to atheism. But because even when I was in college, there's that French composer. His name's Oliver Messiaen. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but he had this beautiful religious piece, and one of my piano instructors, she did a live performance of it, and it was terrific. And she even said, like, you know, but when she was presenting it, she's like, you know, I'm an atheist, but even I am moved by, you know, his passion for you know depicting the word of God through music. So I think, you know, at the very least, you know, maybe just, you know, creative people, in particular musicians, maybe we're just more sensitive to, you know, it's like, even if I don't agree or identify with your, again, there's that stupid term, identify, but like, even if I don't necessarily agree with a certain set of beliefs, but it's sort of like I can resonate with, you know, performing something for something bigger than me.
Right. You know, interestingly, there was this, I guess he must have been a conductor, and he would spend a few months a year in Kiev. And this was quite a few years ago now, but I remember him talking about how because under communism, they understood the power of this music as leading people to God. They recognized that trajectory. And so my understanding is that a lot of those composers were banned, like they weren't permitted to even be known. And so when he was going in and working with these beautiful, skilled classical musicians, he would introduce them to Bach. And he said it happened all the time that they would have these like instantaneous, powerful, complete conversions. Because they were just, for us, we've heard these sounds kind of, even if you're not in the classical world, you sort of grow up with this awareness, but because of the complete lack of exposure, they would play this stuff and just have these massive, strange kind of encounters. Right. So it was such a testimony to the power of music and just that building, again, coming back to our other point about just building lasting things and how you can create something so powerful that it can speak directly to a heart 500 years later. I mean, the power of art is unreal,
Yes. Of true art, not like the stupid superficial crap that we're dealing with nowadays.
Yeah. I know, it's funny getting into the pop realm a little because I'm like, this is clearly not something I'm creating to last forever, but I get to step into the stream of this very ancient history with my chant stuff, right? You guys know I did some Gregorian and hymns and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I get to step into that stream and then also do this very hyper kind of the moment thing as well. But even with that project, I can't help but like the Catholicism just leaks into everything. It's impossible to not have that happen. But so for this pop project, it's a lot of like apocalyptic kind of dystopian themes and stuff that I'm playing with. But it's interesting that power is there for at least certain forms. It'll be interesting to hear what pop is relevant centuries from now.
It's so funny that you're going through this sort of this phase, because I remember a few years ago, I don't know if you guys paid much attention to this. This was a few years ago. But Taylor Swift, who in the early days of her career, and I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, never was, but like
Swiftie.
Right, I'm not a Swiftie, but she experienced a lot of criticism because she was not, at least initially, she was not politically vocal. Now she's very, very woke and very establishment, but like she was getting a lot of criticism from progressive woke people for not like, how come you're not speaking out about women's things? And it's funny, Ben Shapiro, I remember like when I first started listening to Ben Shapiro, he was like, don't make me defend Taylor Swift. Like, she's a successful woman on her own, and she's built a whole empire just creating music that people like. Don't make me defend her. It's like you would think that if she's that like you're criticizing her for not being feminist enough, but she's one of the richest women in the world. Why isn't that a good enough model for women? Right. But then obviously she's transitioned and she's become very, very, very politically vocal. But so anyway, I guess Kay, I'm just saying be careful, like don't get seduced by like the
pop culture world.
The pop, yeah.
I think maybe that's part of why I love doing it. I get a kick out of just anything that's just counter to what people expect, right? So I just think there's something very humorous to me about this like chant singing Catholic stepping into like pop beats, I just find it very funny. And the neat thing too is I'm so detached from outcome. Like I'm just doing this because it's fun and I stumbled into it and I've got this great producer and then I think too, I also have a question as to why Christians and conservatives are not meaningfully intersecting more with pop culture. Like it's like so many people that would be peers for me, and these are probably a lot of people I love, so I don't want to be hypercritical, but it's like they only care about the fine arts as sort of a way forward for culture. And I guess it's like living out different theses, right? Some people think like if you just do really beautiful liturgy and you focus on passing on this tradition and making beautiful high art, that's just going to flow out to the culture. And I think actually that's a valid thesis. But I'm more of the mind where I want to intersect with it and meaningfully engage with it and even try to bring more of like the intellectual depth I have as a Catholic into this weird sphere. So this is my experimental process with, seeing if I can step into that world a little and just offer something really, really unique. Because I think there's nobody in pop who's singing about this stuff or bringing that different layer of meaning to what is a pretty generally understood shallow universe,
Yes.
So
Yeah, your musical transformation resonates with me a lot because like I'm in a band right now and it's in a genre that I'm not very familiar with. So but it's been a very rewarding challenge for me. So I'm curious, because I'm more familiar with like your sort of like more folksy acoustic stuff. So I'm curious about like what you make in the coming months.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a couple songs up. This really funny Christmas song that I never intended on anybody even knowing that I'd written, but I just decided to release it for fun. And then it's just like, yeah, you'll be like, oh my goodness. And then another one I wrote that we released last year on Valentine's Day called Love Songs. And it's just fun. It's just fun. Like, I think the coolest thing is literally, I just don't care. I'm like, this is just fun. If people think this is stupid, I'm like, of course it is. Like, this is just me having fun, But yeah, I'll be releasing a lot more. And the pop name is Pax Paloma.
All right.
Yeah. So I get a little bit of that Latin in there. Yeah. I should tell you guys. Actually, I should tell you more because I think it's interesting. So I decided to call the genre geek pop because I can't resist. On top of like the Catholic thing leaking in, it's just like I'm a geek. Like I read huge novels and like to think about space and weird things. Like that's where I live. And so a lot of the songs are literary. So I have a song about Flannery O'Connor. I think we talked about her a little last time. I have a song about.
I actually want to talk about that when you're done. I forgot. Yeah. As you can tell by my name here, I reread.
Yeah.
So I actually reread A Good Man Is Hard to Find last night because we had talked about it before. I know it's probably her most well-known work, at least her most well-known short story.
You're right, though. A good Ben is hard to find. I'm still on the search. I'm still the investigation's ongoing.
There aren't too many of us, but I still just find it so depressing.
Yeah,
and I'm not. So, like, what's your interpretation of it? And of course, the biggest part is when the grandmother,
right,
says like you're my child, right? Was that the line?
I have to be honest. That one I haven't read.
Oh, okay.
So I should have done it. But what I can tell you is that Flannery's trying to shock people awake to the reality of good and evil. That's like what her laser focus as an author was. She wanted to force people to open a Bible to understand her stuff. She wanted to, she was living in a completely Baptist place. So she was also sort of like me and like just kind of fascinated in being a Catholic in this world and integrating that into her work. But she really just wanted to, like really force people to ask hard questions about grace and reality and evil. And she's not even, I don't love her work in the way that a lot of people do. I appreciate her. And so much so that I wanted to write a song about her because I'm just absolutely fascinated by her. But I did have an experience with a couple of her works where rereading it, and maybe we talked about this, like I saw the brilliance of her threading everything through in a way that I didn't see the first time through. And it was like this shock of grace and in and through all of this very messy, earthy stuff.
What you putting it that way does make me feel like, so if I can spoil the story.
Please don't.
You don't want me to spoil it?
I'm just kidding. Go for it.
Well, no, because there is a moment where like, I like how you put that, the shock of grace. And I'm going to spoil it because I can't talk about it without it. So,
la.
Maybe
I should read it and do this again sometime.
Okay, we can do that too. But there is a moment in there that I'm like, okay, if you're saying the shock of grace, because she's known for writing some really horrible characters, as in like menacing, evil characters. And then one, I'll say it without spoiling it, like one kind of recoils from the humanness and the grace that a victim shows him. And something happens, and then he kind of returns to his normal sense. But I guess I do see that sort of shock of grace and how even within, oh my God, am I convincing myself of the Catholicism as I think about it? Like you see the touch of love that he receives in that moment like shocks him so much that he reacts and does something evil, but it's literally like a reaction. It's not really a conscious it's not really a conscious movement, and that's because he, I guess, maybe wasn't used to it. He had never felt that, and it was like this shock of grace. So I actually do see that. Now that sounds very abstract because I didn't want to give away the story.
Yeah. I mean, I think for her, there's just this pulsing reality behind everything. It's like it's the Hopkins line, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. Like that there's this heartbeat behind every blade of grass, every candle, every single thing is just sort of enlivened by this other world that we can't see. And so it's like she's always trying to like see how that world is cutting in around matter. And it's really fascinating when you start seeing what she's doing in it.
Maybe I'll reread more. I just reread that story. I have the book, which is a compilation, but I just read that story, A Good Man Is Hard to Find. And it's very good. It's really, and it's only like 25 pages. And
she's Irish, though?
Unfortunately, yeah.
I'm Irish.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, this episode will never go live then.
Well, we said
no
Irish. The Irish need not appear on our podcasts.
Australians,
and I'm kidding. Actually, the Irish I've always said the Irish and the Russians make the best storytellers.
It's the melancholy, right? That compulsive cultural melancholy, I think, just has to lead.
It is. I don't know what it is about the Irish. I think maybe they're like secluded out there, and the Englishers have been like beating the crap out of them for so long. And I don't know what the Russians have got going on. I'm gonna do a verbal meme real quick that I always love. It's like 4 writers. It's like the American writer. I will die for freedom. Oh! The British, you know this one? The British writer, I will die for honor. The French writer, I will die for love. The Russian writer, I will die. I love that.
So if you were to add Irish to that, what would it be?
I will die for
fun
whiskey. Like, I don't know.
No, but seriously, I actually like so.
I'm kidding. I love the Irish. I love Irish stories.
No,
Banshees of Inisherin is my favorite movie of the year. It's amazing. Go see it.
Which movie?
The Banshees of Inisherin. Oh my god, it's so good. You have to see it. It's amazing.
Some of my favorite horror movies of the last few years have been from Ireland, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. There's like a bleakness to it. I don't know. I know very little about Irish.
It's weird because I think it's a bleakness, but also a beauty. Like I see what you're saying. Where I think Russia just is like bleak. Like, Ireland, I think, has a beautiful bleakness to it.
Yes, and because the Irish horror films that I've been watching lately, it's like they're still really well made. Like it's not just depressing. It's like, wow, this is actually like kind of a profound horror movie, but it's still. Also, there's something very interesting about like a lot of Irish folk tales, because like when we hear about like fairies and stuff, we think like sort of magical Disney. It's like no, a lot of those Irish folk tales are actually pretty dark.
Yeah.
Which is what these Irish horror films.
Tons of the German ones are super dark.
I'd heard that the Germans and the Celts were, if you go back into history of like the pagan roots, like really nasty, brutal kind of stuff that was happening before they were evangelized. Like this was a really, really dark culture.
Did you guys ever read Rumpelstiltskin? Like the original? He rips himself. No, and I mean, but it's an old timey. Like folk tale, but like he rips himself in half at the end. Like it's a pretty gory story. Like it's like, but it's funny. Like the Brothers Grimm, like these magical Disney-esque fairy tales. It's like no, almost all of them had like really bloody, gory endings. Like they're really brutal.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
No, but
takes a swig of the.
I got a tiny bit of Yag left.
Yeah. Chug it. Here, you chug that, and I'll chug this. No.
I love that you drank Jägermeister out of a wine glass.
I know.
That's so great.
I love that you drank out of it in the wrong way, because you're supposed to hold it by the stem.
Right.
But you were holding it by.
I lack elegance. I didn't hang around with my noble friends enough.
You lack the social graces, Kay.
I do. Got to stay a little bit earthy, like as an artist.
How come this long-haired heavy metal caveman is more aware of the social niceties of drinking wine than you, Kay?
Oh, it's funny though. Like when I was living in Europe and I was having dinner with some friends, like they're all so just naturally elegant. Even and it didn't matter. Some of them were sort of from an upper strata of society, but some of them were just, the peasantry, if you will. And there's just a natural elegance and beauty knit into so much of European life, and I just always felt like a barbarian. I was so embarrassed, and I had to really learn to sort of do things better, so I'm glad for that, and I always think of that especially when I'm out at a fancy dinner or something.
I've held back so many burps during this podcast.
There's a lady in the room.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Should we talk? Is there anything else that we should talk about? Is there anything we should riff on? Is there,
I don't know. I think I am just really excited about this pop project coming up. Yes. And it's really enjoyable to just be doing all of the different things I'm doing and letting my life, as I kind of was saying, like be a bit of a thesis about how you can do all of these things in an authentic way. And even for me, as a Catholic, as a conservative, whatever, that this stuff can leak authentically into whatever you're doing. And I think real artists, I would love to see more artists have the courage to just let themselves leak into their work in an authentic way without trying to hyper control it. So it's fun to do it all. Yeah.
That's so wonderful to hear because, like here at the Reckless Muse, we, kind of have like a sort of rebellious, irreverent tone. But it's funny because like, we've had several guests on the show where it's like, you might not immediately think like, oh yeah, rebellion. Yeah. But it's sort of like, authenticity and beauty, like that's sort of countercultural these days.
Yeah.
Like when you look at sort of like the blandness of pop culture these days, and it's like nobody's taking risks, or even if they do take risks, like they're very ugly risks.
Right.
So it's just sort of like, like Alma Cook, she's been on our show numerous times, and she's a very devout Catholic, but it's sort of like, like being true to yourself and that's so rare these days. That's so countercultural these days.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show. And so, can you tell our audience where they can find you, where they can follow your work?
Yeah. So Twitter's always good. It's Kate Clarity on any platform that I am on. Some of them I don't even remember, but I might be there still. But Twitter's where I'm most active these days. And then I have a Substack link through there and website.
Chaos and Beauty.
Sorry?
Chaos and Beauty, right?
Beauty. Yeah. And then kateclarity.com or kateclarity.art, and you'll get to my website as well. So, yeah. Be fun.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Okay, thanks so much, guys.
And so we'll have you back on another time. And so we'd love to, get your thoughts on what's going on culturally and some other, what's going on in your world. And thank you so much for coming on, Kay. And stay reckless, everybody.
Awesome. Reckless. Get crits.